Hey guys, tonight we drift into the cold northern mists where even the Vikings, the wolves of the sea, whispered in fear. It is time to let the day go. Let the heavy curtain of the present fall away, and imagine yourself sitting by a dying fire in a longhouse, the wood popping softly, the smell of wood smoke and damp wool in the air. Like and subscribe if this pulls you in, and please comment down below where you are listening from and what time it is there. I always love reading about the quiet corners of the world where you all find rest. Settle deep now, pull the blanket up to your chin, and let your eyes grow heavy as we uncover the one shadow that made the Northmen shiver. We often think of the Vikings as the ultimate terrors of the medieval world. We picture them as an unstoppable tide of iron, oak, and fury, crashing against the shores of England, France, and even distant Constantinople. We see the dragon-headed ships cutting through the waves, the berserkers biting their shields, the monasteries burning. In our minds, and in the history books, they are the apex predators of the Dark Ages. They feared nothing. They laughed at storms. They walked into death with a song on their lips, hoping for the halls of Valhalla. But this is not entirely true. Even the wolf fears the thing that watches from the deep woods. Even the shark fears the silence of the abyss. Tonight, we are going to talk about the fear that existed in the hearts of these warriors. Not the fear of battle, or swords, or axes. Those were things they understood. Those were tangible. You could block a sword. You could break a shield. No, we are talking about the fear of the unknown. The fear of a people who did not fight like men, but like ghosts. We are traveling to the jagged, mist-choked highlands and islands of ancient Scotland, to the land of the Picts, the painted people, and perhaps we will drift further north to the deep frozen forests of the Sami, whose magic was said to untie the winds themselves. Imagine, if you will, the texture of a Viking longship. Run your mind over the rough, salt-crusted oak of the gunwale. The wood is cold, damp, and smells of old tar, and the deep, briny ocean. You are rowing. The rhythm is hypnotic. Pull and glide. Pull and glide. The water is grey, reflecting a sky that looks like bruised iron. You are heading toward a coast that looks less like land and more like a jagged tear in the horizon. The Vikings called this place the land of the Picts, and they did not like to go there. The first reason for this deep, unsettling dread was the silence. When Vikings raided the coasts of Wessex or Francia, there was noise. There were church bells ringing in panic. There were shouts, the clash of metal, the chaotic symphony of a raid. It was loud, and in that noise, the Viking felt alive. But the Pictish coast was different. The sagas tell us of the unnerving quiet that hung over the inlets and the sea locks. Picture a longship gliding into a narrow fjord in the north of Britain. The mist is so thick you can taste it, droplets of cold water clinging to your beard, your eyelashes. The cliffs rise up on either side, vanishing into the grey soup above. It is completely silent, no birds, no wind. Just the sound of your own heart beating in your ears, and the soft lap of water against the hull. The Vikings believed that silence was the language of the dead. And here, in this land, the silence was heavy. It watched you. They say that when the Vikings first encountered the tribes of the north, specifically the Picts. They were confused. The Vikings were people of display. They wore their wealth, heavy silver arm rings, intricate brooches, swords with hilts inlaid with gold and garnet. They were loud about who they were, but the Picts were shadows. The Roman legions, centuries before, had built a massive wall just to keep them out. And even the Romans, with all their discipline and engineering, could not tame them. Now, the Vikings were finding out why. The Picts did not meet them on the beach in a shield wall. That was the honorable way. That was the way of the Norsemen. You stand line against line, you shout insults, you crash together. It is brutal, but it is honest. The Picts, however, dissolved. When the longships landed, grounding on the pebble beaches with a crunch of timber on stone, the shore would be empty, just grey stones, wet heather, and the drifting fog. Imagine stepping off that boat. Your leather boots sink into the soft, sodden peat moss. The smell here is different. It smells of ancient earth, rotting kelp, and something metallic, like rain on hot stone. You walk inland, your axe heavy in your hand. You are looking for a village, a monastery, cattle, anything to take. But there is nothing, just the rolling hills, covered in purple heather that looks black in the twilight. And then the fear starts. It isn't a sudden panic. It is a slow creeping sensation, like cold water seeping into a boot. You feel eyes on you. The Vikings were incredibly superstitious. They believed the land itself had spirits, landwights, that could turn against you if you weren't careful. In Pictland, the land felt hostile. The rocks seemed to have faces. In fact, they literally did. This brings us to the second layer of this terror, the stones. The Vikings were carvers. Yes, they carved runes into wood and bone. But the Picts left massive, standing stones scattered across their landscape, carved with symbols that no one else understood. Imagine a Viking raiding party, moving silently through a glen as the sun begins to set. The light is failing, turning the world into shades of charcoal and indigo. Suddenly, looming out of the mist, is a 10-foot slab of granite. On it, carved with impossible precision, are shapes. A crescent, a broken rod, a strange beast that looks like a dolphin, or maybe an elephant, or a dragon, but not quite. To the Norse mind, which saw magic in symbols, these were not just art. They were wards. They were curses. The Vikings believed that writing had power that runes could heal or kill. To see these alien symbols standing guard in the middle of nowhere, with no one around to explain them, was deeply unsettling. It was like walking into a room where a conversation had just stopped, and everyone was looking at you. There are stories in the Orkneyinga saga, tales told by the Norse who settled in the islands north of Scotland, about the petty kings and the dark sorcery of the natives. They didn't understand the Pictish society. It was matrilineal, perhaps, or at least it seemed that way to them. The lineage passed in ways that confused the patriarchal Vikings. To them, confusion was dangerous. If you cannot understand your enemy, you cannot predict them. And if you cannot predict them, you cannot defeat them. Let's go deeper into the physical appearance of this tribe, or at least, how the Vikings perceived them in their nightmares. The Romans called them Picti, the painted ones. The Vikings, coming centuries later, encountered the remnants of this tradition. Imagine facing a warrior who is not wearing mail or carrying a heavy wooden shield, but is stripped to the waist, their skin an intricate tapestry of blue swirls. The dye was likely woad, a plant that produces a deep indigo blue. But it wasn't just paint. It was the skin itself, tattooed and stained, turning the human body into a work of art or a demon. In the chaotic blur of combat, or the dimly lit ambush in a forest, these blue markings would make the warrior hard to see. They would blend into the shadows, into the twilight. A Viking might swing his sword at a man, only to find he was swinging at a shadow. A trick of the eye. There is a specific kind of dread that comes from fighting something that looks human, but doesn't act like it. The Vikings prided themselves on their humanity, their laws, their assembly the thing. They were civilized in their own way, but the tribes of the deep north, they seemed feral to the Norse eye. They fought with spears, yes, but also with the terrain. They would lure the Vikings into the bogs. The bogs. Let's rest here for a moment. Picture the peat bogs of northern Scotland. It is a landscape that is neither solid nor liquid. It is a living sponge. The surface is a carpet of bright green sfognam moss, looking soft and inviting, like a bed. But underneath is black, anaerobic water, feet deep, miles deep in time. The Picts knew the paths. They knew where the ground would hold a man's weight and where it would swallow him whole. The Vikings, weighed down by their chainmail shirts, thousands of riveted iron rings heavy on their shoulders, did not know the paths. There are lingering oral traditions of Viking patrols following a retreating Pictish warrior. The Pict, light and swift, dances across the moss. The Vikings, angry and eager for blood, charge after him. And then the earth opens. The lead warrior steps on a patch of green that gives way instantly. There is no splash, just a sucking sound, a wet thwack. He goes down to his waist in the freezing, black sludge. The more he struggles, the tighter the bog grips him. His friends try to reach him, but the ground beneath them begins to tremble and weep water. And the Pict, he stops. He turns around. He doesn't attack. He just watches. He stands on a solid hummock of grass, perhaps leaning on his spear, watching the heavy iron men sink into the earth. That image, the silent watcher, the swallowing earth, kept Viking children awake at night in the safety of their homes in Norway. It was a psychological warfare that the Norse were not equipped for. They were used to fear being a loud thing, a shout, a roar. Here, fear was a whisper. It was the snapping of a twig when you knew you were alone. It was the finding of a symbol carved into the tree next to your camp that wasn't there when you went to sleep. The Vikings also feared the magic of the north. We must talk about the Finnfolk and the sorcerers, often conflated with the Sami people of Lapland, but also associated with the mysterious tribes of the Scottish Isles. The Norse sagas are full of warnings about trading or fighting with the Finns, meaning the Sami. They believed these tribes could control the weather. Now, to a sailor, the weather is God. The weather decides if you live or die. If you are in the middle of the North Sea in an open boat, a storm is the end of the world. The Vikings believed that the northern tribes could untie 3 knots in a magical cord to release the wind. 1 knot for a breeze, 2 for a gale, 3 for a hurricane. Imagine being a Viking captain, a jarl of great renown. You have sacked cities. You have amassed silver. But as you sail past the headlands of Scotland or the northern coasts of Scandinavia, the sky turns an unnatural shade of green. The wind dies completely. The sails hang limp and useless, flapping lazily against the mast with a sound like a slow drumbeat. The sea becomes oily and flat, and you know, deep in your gut, that this isn't natural. You believe that somewhere on the cliffs, a shaman is whispering to the clouds. You feel helpless, and Vikings hated feeling helpless. They were men of action. This passive dread, this waiting for a curse to land, was torture to them. It gnawed at their morale. There are accounts of crews refusing to go further north, mutinying not because of a lack of food or pay, but because the air felt wrong, because the birds were flying backwards, because the water tasted bitter. Let's settle back into the landscape for a moment. The environment itself was a weapon used by these tribes. The Scottish highlands and the islands are defined by their verticality and their wetness. Rain here is not an event. It is a state of being. It drizzles for days, weeks on end. A fine, soaking mist that penetrates everything. For a Viking army on the march, this was miserable. Bowstrings, made of sinew or hemp, would go slack in the damp. Iron swords would begin to rust overnight, turning orange and pitted. Woolen cloaks would become heavy, weighing 50 pounds with absorbed water, dragging in the mud. And the cold, it wasn't the crisp, dry cold of a Norwegian winter, which bites and freezes. It was a damp, rotting cold that got into the joints. It made old wounds ache. It made the mind slow and sluggish. The tribes were masters of this grey world. They lived in brocks, and this is a crucial part of the terror. We need to visualize a brock. It is a tower, built entirely of dry stone, no mortar, just rocks stacked with incredible skill, rising 30, 40 feet into the air. They look like nuclear cooling towers made of prehistoric rock. They have no windows, just a single, low entrance that forces you to stoop, to bow your head, exposing your neck. When Vikings came across these towers, they were baffled. They couldn't burn them down, they were made of stone. They couldn't smash them easily, the walls were incredibly thick, sometimes hollow with staircases inside them. They were fortresses that looked like part of the geology. A Viking raiding party could spend days trying to siege a brock, while the inhabitants simply sat inside, safe and warm, occasionally dropping a rock on a Norseman's head. It made the Vikings feel small. Their great halls of timber were vulnerable to fire. These stone towers felt eternal. It felt like fighting the earth itself. And inside those towers, the Picts lived a life that was hidden from the Norse. They didn't know how many were inside. They didn't know if they had food for days or years. The brock stood silent, a stone sentinel against the grey sky, denying the Vikings their glory. We often forget that the Vikings were storytellers. They lived for fame. Laugh, they called it. The glory that survives you after death. You gain laugh by defeating a great enemy, by doing something worthy of a song. How do you sing a song about a raid where the enemy never showed their face? Where you marched through a bog for 3 days, lost 2 men to the mud, 1 to a poisoned dart from a tree line, and found only empty stone towers? There is no glory in that. There is only frustration and fear The tribes denied the Vikings their narrative. They refused to be the villains in the Viking story. They remained the ghosts. And that, in a way, is the most terrifying thing of all. To be ignored, to be rendered powerless by an enemy who won't play the game. But the fear went deeper than just tactics. It went to the very soul of the Viking worldview. The Norse had a structured view of the universe. Asgard for the gods, Midgard for humans, Utgard for the chaotic forces, the giants. They saw these northern tribes as belonging to Utgard. They weren't fully human in the Norse eyes. They were creatures of the chaotic wilderness. In the sagas, when a Viking hero marries a woman from these tribes, which happened, often in the context of creating alliances or through capture, it is always treated with a sense of unease. The woman is beautiful, yes, but dangerous. She knows things. She dreams of things before they happen. She might birth a son who is a wolf in spirit. The bloodline of the northern tribes was seen as potent, volatile magic. To mix your blood with them was to invite the chaos into your own family tree. Think of the silence of the winter nights in the north, the aurora borealis, the northern lights flickering overhead, green, purple, and red ribbons dancing in the dark. The Vikings called it the Bifrost, or the reflection of Valkyria armor. But the Sami and the northern tribes, they sang to the lights. They whistled to them. The Vikings watched from their ships, shivering in their furs, hearing the high-pitched, rhythmic chanting drifting across the water, watching the lights dance in time to the music. It must have felt like the universe was listening to these tribes and ignoring the Norse. The psychological toll of this cannot be overstated. We have archaeological evidence of Viking settlements in Orkney and Shetland, where they built their houses directly on top of earlier Pictish ones. Literally on top, covering them up, trying to stomp them down into the history. But they kept the artifacts. We find Pictish painted pebbles and carved bones in Viking graves. Why? Were they trophies? Or were they talismans? Did the Vikings keep these items because they feared that if they threw them away, the ghosts would come back? It's a specific kind of haunting. The haunting of a conqueror who knows, deep down, that they don't truly own the land they have taken. They have planted their crops, built their halls, but the land remembers the old masters. The wind in the grass sounds like the old language. As we go deeper into this night, we will explore the specific legends, the tales of shapeshifting, of warriors who turned into bears and wolves, not the Viking berserkers, but something far more primal. We will look at the archaeological evidence of the massacres, the sudden disappearances, and the strange, uneasy peace that eventually formed. But first, we must understand the weapons. Not the swords, but the poisons, the traps, and the terrifying use of nature itself against the invaders. We are drifting now, further from the shore. The fires of the longhouse are dimming to glowing embers. The story is just beginning to unravel its dark threads. The fire has burned down a little lower now. The bright orange flames have settled into a deep, pulsing red glow, like the heartbeat of a sleeping mountain. The shadows in the corners of the room have grown longer, stretching out as if they want to join us in our story. Let them come. We are safe here. We are just travelers in the memory of the world. Take a deep breath. Hold it for a moment, tasting the stillness, and let it out slowly. Let the tension in your shoulders melt like snow in the spring sun. We are going back to the forest, back to the mist, back to the fear. We were speaking of the weapons of the ghost people, the tribes that dwelt in the shadows of the Viking world. When a Norse warrior thought of a weapon, he thought of weight. He thought of the bearded axe, a heavy wedge of iron on a solid oak haft, designed to split a shield or a helm. He thought of the sword, the pattern-welded blade, twisted rods of iron forged together to create a weapon that rippled like water. These were weapons of status, weapons that required strength, weapons that made a loud, ringing sound when they struck. But the tribes of the north, their weapons made no sound, and this terrified the Vikings. There is a specific fear attached to the silent death. In the sagas, death is often loud. A man boasts, he fights, he falls, he speaks a final poem. But in the deep woods of ancient Finland, or the glens of Pictland, death arrived on the wind. Imagine walking through a dense pine forest. The trees are tall, ancient sentinels with rough bark covered in grey lichen. The canopy is so thick that the sky is just a fragmented mosaic of grey and white above you. The ground is a carpet of brown needles that muffles your footsteps. You are a Viking sentry. You are wearing your helmet, the metal cold against your brow. You are watching for movement, but the forest is still. Then there is a tiny sound, not a shout, just a thwip, a whisper in the air. A dart, no longer than a finger, strikes your arm. It feels like nothing more than a bee sting. You look down. A small piece of wood, tipped with bone, is sticking out of your leather jerkin. You pull it out. You laugh. What kind of weapon is this? It is a toy. It is a child's plaything. But the tip was dipped in something dark. Monk's hood, wolf's bane, the juice of the yew berry. The tribes knew the chemistry of the forest in a way the Vikings did not. The Vikings knew the sea. The tribes knew the sap. Slowly, the laughter dies in your throat. Your tongue feels thick, like it is made of wool. Your heart begins to stumble, missing beats, fluttering like a bird trapped in a box. Your vision blurs at the edges, turning grey. You fall to your knees in the soft pine needles. The forest spins, and as you fade, you see them. Not an army, just one figure, standing perfectly still by the trunk of a tree, watching you. They do not draw a sword. They do not come to finish you. They just wait for the poison to do its quiet work. To the Viking mind, this was distinctively unmanly. It was urging a grave insult implying shame and cowardice. But deep down, beneath the bravado, it was terrifying because it couldn't be fought. You cannot parry a poison. You cannot intimidate a plant. It made the Vikings feel that the land itself was rejecting them, that the very flowers were at war with them. Let's drift towards the idea of the trap. The Norse culture celebrated the duel. The holmgang. Two men, an island or a cloak spread on the ground, fighting until blood is drawn or one is dead. Rules. Honor. The tribes didn't care for rules. They cared for survival. Archaeologists have found evidence of pits dug into the paths of ancient Scotland. Deep pits covered with thin wicker mats and strewn with earth and leaves. At the bottom, sharpened stakes, hardened in the fire. Imagine the humiliation of a Jarl, a leader of men, striding confidently at the head of his column. He is thinking of the gold he will plunder. He takes a step, and the world drops away. He falls into the darkness. There is no enemy to strike back at, just the earth swallowing him. His men stop. They are frozen. They look at the hole in the ground. They look at the silent trees. Do they move forward? Do they go back? Paranoia sets in. Every patch of disturbed earth looks like a grave. Every shadow looks like a pit. The march slows to a crawl. The confidence evaporates. The wolf of the sea becomes a timid deer, stepping gingerly, afraid of the ground he walks on. This is how you defeat a superior enemy without ever striking a blow. You break their mind. You make them afraid to move. And as they stood there, paralyzed in the gloom, the Vikings would remember the stories of the Hamram, the shape strong, the skin turners. This is perhaps the most atmospheric and chilling part of the folklore surrounding the conflict between the Norse and the Sami or Pictish peoples. The Vikings believed that certain people had souls that could detach from their bodies. While the body lay asleep or in a trance, the soul would take the form of an animal, a bear, a wolf, a whale, or a raven. They called this the filger, the fetch, but in its aggressive form, it was terrifying. Picture a Viking camp at night. The longships are pulled up on the beach, their dragon heads silhouetted against the stars. The fires are burning low. The men are sleeping wrapped in their fur cloaks, huddling together for warmth. The sentries are pacing the perimeter. It is cold, that biting, damp cold of the northern coast. A large bear walks out of the darkness. It is huge, bigger than any bear should be. Its fur is matted with ice. Its eyes reflect the firelight with an intelligence that is to human. A sentry shouts. He throws a spear. The spear hits the bear's shoulder and bounces off, not because the hide is too thick, but because the weapon seems to slide off the air around it. The bear does not roar. It doesn't charge in a blind rage. It walks with purpose. It walks like a man. The Vikings believed that the shamans of the north, the Noidi of the Sami, could do this. They believed that if you struck the bear, the shaman sleeping miles away in his tent would wake up with a bruise on his shoulder. But in the moment, facing the beast, the intellectual connection didn't matter. What mattered was the monster. There are accounts in the Landnámabók, the Book of Settlements, and various family sagas, of battles where the enemy was led by a creature that could not be killed by iron. Bite-proof, they called it. Only a sword forged with ancient spells or a club of wood could hurt it. Imagine the panic. You are a warrior who trusts his steel. You have paid a fortune for your sword, and now it is useless. You are hitting a nightmare with a metal stick, and the nightmare is looking at you with your grandfather's eyes. The psychological weight of this belief was enormous. It meant that the enemy was never truly sleeping. Even when the tribes retreated, even when they were nowhere to be seen, they could be watching you through the eyes of a seagull perched on your mast. They could be listening through the ears of the stray dog that followed your camp. You were never alone. The privacy of the Viking, the ability to plan and scheme, was stripped away by this paranoia. Let's sink deeper into the auditory landscape of this fear. The sound of the drums. The Norse had music. They had lyres, bone flutes, and the rhythmic chanting of poetry. But the Sami and the northern shamanic cultures had the drum. The rune bomb, a frame drum made of birch wood. covered with reindeer hide, painted with maps of the spirit world. When the Vikings approached the northern territories, often the first thing they encountered was not a weapon, but a sound. A low, steady trumming. Dum, dum, dum. It wasn't a war march. It wasn't the fast, adrenaline-pumping beat of a galley slave master. It was a trance beat slow, repetitive deep. Sound travels strangely over water and through fog. It distorts. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. Imagine lying in your boat, the fog pressing against your face, and you hear that drum beat. It resonates in your chest cavity. It matches the rhythm of your heart and then slows it down. It is hypnotic. It is the sound of the earth breathing. The Vikings feared this sound because they knew what it meant. It meant the shaman was journeying. It meant the spirits were being called up from the underworld, the Saver. To the Norse, who feared the undead Draugr and the dark elves, the idea of a man deliberately opening the door to the spirit world was madness. It was reckless, and it was directed at them. The drumbeat would continue for hours, maybe days, denying them sleep. You can close your eyes, but you cannot close your ears. The relentless, monotonous thudding would wear down their nerves. It was sonic warfare. By the time the Vikings actually landed, if they landed at all, they were exhausted, irritable, and jumpy. They had been haunted before they even stepped off the boat. And then there was the darkness itself. The Vikings were solar people. Their year was all about the return of the sun, right? They battled at dawn, fighting in the light where the gods could see them. But up north, things were a bit different. When winter hits, the sun just doesn't rise. That's when the Comos, or polar night, comes creeping in. Picture a twilight of blue and grey that lingers for months. The tribes up there, they thrived in this darkness. They moved through it like it was second nature. They had these amazing ski skrid fins, or sliding fins, as the sagas call them. While the Vikings were trudging through snow that was waist deep, sweating and cursing, these tribal hunters were gliding over the surface like whispers in the night. Can you imagine that? Silent, fast, like ghosts on wood. Now, think about being snowbound in a foreign land where the sun never shines. You're huddled in a makeshift shelter, and outside, the wind is howling like a wild beast. In that blackness, men are gliding on the snow, circling you. You can't see them, but you know they're out there. Every now and then, an arrow flies out of the dark and thuds into the wood of your wall. It's like a chilling reminder. We're here. This is our dark. You're just guests, and you've overstayed your welcome. Sure, the Vikings were brave, but bravery is one thing. Facing a known danger is one thing. Facing the endless night, the cold that snaps trees, and those silent skiers who hunt you like elk, that's a whole different level of endurance. And let me tell you, the Vikings found it hard to maintain that endurance. There's this story, maybe it's true. Maybe it is just a mix of memory and myth about a Viking raid up north where the attackers just gave up. They weren't beaten in battle. They simply stopped. The darkness got to them. The silence wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. The commander looked at his men, saw that hollow look in their eyes, the way they jumped at shadows, and decided to turn the ships around. They sailed back south, back to the lands where the sun rose, back to where enemies stood in lines. Shouting, they fled the quiet. And then there are the Picts, the painted people. They had their own way of dealing with this atmospheric defense. Ever heard of souterrains? Those underground passages, earth houses? The Vikings would roll into a village or what looked like a village. Low stone walls, thatched roofs. They'd charge in, axes raised, screaming their war cries. But guess what? They'd find the houses empty, fires still burning, food still warm on the table. But no people. Where did they go? Did they fly away? Did they turn into birds? Then, suddenly, the ground would whisper. The Picts were beneath them. They had slipped into those stone-lined tunnels dug deep into the earth, hidden beneath the floorboards or the sheep pens. While the Vikings ransacked the empty houses above, the people were moving below, crawling through those dark, damp tunnels to escape into the woods hundreds of yards away. Imagine standing in a house you've just conquered and realizing the enemy is right under your feet. You can hear them moving muffled scrapes, soft thuds. It flips the power dynamic completely. You're standing on top of the trap. Do you burn the house? If you do, you destroy the prize. Do you dig them out? Good luck fitting down those narrow holes with your armor and broad shoulders. You're big, bulky, and stuck on the surface. They're small, fluid, and part of the earth. The Vikings called the Pictish language unintelligible, like the chattering of birds. To them, it wasn't a language of trade or diplomacy. It was a code, because they couldn't speak it. They couldn't negotiate. You can't offer a treaty to a ghost. You can't bribe a shadow. This lack of communication bred a deep, xenophobic horror. In the Viking worldview, everything had a name. If you knew the name of a thing, you had power over it. Odin learned the runes to gain wisdom. Not knowing the names of these people, not understanding their words, left them feeling powerless. It created a void in their knowledge, and the Vikings absolutely hated that void. So, what did they do? They told stories. They turned the tribes into monsters. It was a defense mechanism. If the enemy is a sorcerer, then it's no shame to run away. If the enemy can turn into a bear, then it's totally okay to be afraid. The myths of the terrible North were created not just to warn others, but to excuse the Vikings' own fear, to make it acceptable. I'm not a coward, the Viking says. I just don't fight demons. Let's pause for a moment and really feel the weight of that statement. The most fearsome warriors in history creating monsters in their minds to justify why they couldn't conquer a scattering of tribes in the rain-soaked heather. It's a testament to the power of atmosphere, the power of the unknown. Now, we're drifting further along the timeline. The fire is just a bed of glowing coals, covered in a fine layer of grey ash. The wind outside our imaginary longhouse has picked up, whistling through the eaves, sounding a bit like those ancient bone flutes. We're safe, but out there, in the dark of history, those skiers are still gliding. The painted men are still watching from the tree line. We've talked about weapons, magic, and darkness, but let's not forget about the women. The Valkyries were the Viking ideal of female power choosers of the slain, divine and distant. But the women of the northern tribes, they were right here, on the earth, and the Vikings might have feared them even more than the men. They were the keepers of the lineage, the brewers of potions, the voices that sang storms into existence. In the next part, we'll wander into the domestic terror, the fear of the foreign bride, the bloodline curses, and the slow, strange blending of these two worlds. Because, even fear eventually becomes familiar. Even the ghost becomes a neighbor. But not just yet, for now. That fear is still fresh. The wound is still open. So, let's dive deeper into this rich tapestry of history and emotion, exploring how these dynamics played out in the lives of those who lived in the shadows of the past. The embers are fading now. The deep, pulsing red has given way to a soft, dusty gray, though a gentle warmth still radiates from the hearth. It's the kind of warmth that makes your eyelids heavy, that makes your limbs feel pleasantly loose and sinking into the bed. The wind outside has settled into a low, mournful hum, a lullaby from the ancient world. Let's drift back to that place. Let's step back into the long house of the mind, where the shadows dance on the walls and the stories are told in whispers. We ended the last chapter speaking of women. In the Viking world, women held power. Certainly, they held the keys to the storehouse. They managed the farms while the men were a Viking, and they could divorce their husbands. But the women of the northern tribes, the Picts, the Finns, the Sami, held a power that the Norse men found deeply unsettling, because it wasn't about keys or farms. It was about the unseen. The Vikings called it magic, and while Norse men could practice it, it was considered a woman's art, and a dangerous one at that. When the Vikings looked at the women of the tribes, they didn't just see enemies, they saw witches. There is a recurring theme in the sagas of the Finn wife or the foreign bride from the north. These stories follow a pattern that reveals a deep-seated anxiety. A Viking man, usually a person of some importance, falls for a woman from the tribes. She is often described as strikingly beautiful, but in a way that is sharp, intense, and a little frightening. Her eyes are too clear, her silence is too heavy. He brings her home, and that is when the trouble starts. She doesn't weave like a good Norse wife. She doesn't pray to Thor or Freya. Instead, she goes out into the woods at night. She speaks to the stones, and slowly, the luck of the farm begins to change. The Vikings were obsessed with luck or haminger. It wasn't just chance. It was a tangible force, a reservoir of success and health that belonged to a family. You could inherit it, you could lose it, and you could steal it. They believed these northern women could drain the luck from a household like vampiric spirits. Imagine the tension in a Viking household where such a marriage has occurred. The husband is infatuated, perhaps under a spell, but his kin are terrified. The milk sours in the pail the moment she walks by. The cattle are born with two heads or no eyes. The shadows in the main hall seem to lean toward her. She's a portal to that other world, the world of the bogs and the spirits, right there in the middle of the family. It was a fear of infiltration. The Vikings could build walls to keep out armies. They could build ships to outrun storms. But how do you defend against someone who sleeps in your bed? How do you defend against a whisper in the dark that turns your own children into strangers? The children born of these unions were often the subject of intense scrutiny in the folklore. They were called half-trolls in some of the more prejudiced accounts. They were said to grow faster than normal children, to have strength that was unnatural, and tempers that were as volatile as the northern weather. The most famous example, perhaps, is in Egil's saga, where the grandfather of the hero is Kveldulf, Evening Wolf, a man rumored to be a shapeshifter, hinting at Sami or Finnish ancestry. He is moody, dangerous, and powerful. This fear of the bloodline being tainted by the wild magic of the North was a way for the Vikings to explain the unpredictable elements in their own society. If a man went berserk and killed his neighbor over a trivial insult, maybe it was because his grandmother was a Sami witch. It was a convenient scapegoat, but it was rooted in genuine dread. Let's move from the domestic fear back to the landscape, specifically to the sea, and the creatures that the tribes were said to command. The Vikings were sailors, but they respected the sea as a chaotic force. The tribes, however, were seen as being in league with the monsters of the deep. The Picts carved stones with images of sea beasts, thriving serpents, strange whales, creatures that looked like a mix of wolf and fish. The Pictish beast, as archaeologists call it, is a creature no one can identify. It has a long snout, curling limbs, and a flowing head. To the Vikings, encountering these carvings on the coast markers must have been a warning. Here, the monsters are our friends. There are tales of Viking ships being becalmed, drifting in the silent, grey waters off the Scottish coast. The crew is anxious. Then they see something break the surface. A massive, sleek back. A tail that slaps the water with a sound like a thunderclap. And on the shore, standing on a high cliff, is a lone figure, arms raised. The Vikings connected the two events. The figure on the cliff was calling the beast. The beast was answering. It wasn't just nature. It was a weaponized ecosystem. The Vikings felt that the ocean itself was being turned against them by these people. They felt like intruders in a garden where the gardener had set the dogs on them. Except the dogs were whales, and the garden was the freezing Atlantic. Let's talk about the specific sound of the Pictish language again, but this time in the context of battle. We mentioned the silence, but there was also the war cry. The Romans described the sound of the northern tribes as a barbaric noise. The Vikings, who shouted insults and banged shields, found the Pictish noise unnerving because it was often high-pitched, whistling, or shrieking. It was meant to mimic the sounds of birds of prey, eagles, hawks, screech owls. Imagine a foggy battlefield. You can't see the enemy, but suddenly the air is filled with the screaming of 1,000 hawks. It echoes off the rocks. It pierces the ear. It disorients you. You look up, expecting birds, and a spear takes you in the throat. It was psychological disorientation. The Vikings wanted a man to fight. They wanted a deep voice roaring a challenge. They got a shriek that sounded like the spirit of the wind. It dehumanized the enemy even further, making them seem like harpies or Valkyries gone wrong. It made the Vikings feel they were fighting a swarm, not an army. And what of the Pictish strongholds? We talked of the brocks, the towers, but there were also the hill forts, duns, perched on the very edges of cliffs, with drops of hundreds of feet straight down into the crashing ocean. To attack such a place was suicide. The Vikings were brave, but they weren't stupid. They would look up at these forts, nestled in the clouds. They only approach a narrow goat track where men had to walk single file. And up there, behind stone walls, the painted men waited with rocks and gravity on their side. It was a geography of refusal. The Picts didn't come down to fight on the flat ground where the Vikings' shield wall would be effective. They stayed up in the clouds. They forced the Vikings to come to them on their terms, on their terrain. And often, the Vikings simply looked up, spat on the ground, and sailed away. This refusal to engage is a powerful thing. The Vikings were used to people fleeing or fighting, but the Picts just waited. They endured. They had a patience that the restless Norsemen could not understand. The Viking spirit is one of movement, of expansion. The Pictish spirit was one of roots, of holding on. When an irresistible force meets an immovable object, the force eventually gets tired. The Vikings got tired. They got tired of the rain. They tired of the bogs. They tired of the silence and the shrieking and the stones that watched them. And so, a strange thing began to happen. The raiding turned into something else. It turned into avoidance, and then, slowly, cautiously, into trade. And then, settlement. But even the settlement was fearful. When the Vikings finally did settle in the Hebrides, in Orkney, in Shetland, they didn't just bulldoze the culture that was there. They absorbed it, but with a shudder. They adopted the place names, but often kept the warnings attached to them. There are islands in the north that the Norse called Papi, the island of the priests, referring to the Pictish monks or hermits. The Vikings would often leave these islands alone, or settle only on the edges. They felt the holiness or the strangeness of the place. They didn't want to disturb the spirits that dwelt in the stone cells. This transition from terror to uneasy coexistence is fascinating. The Vikings began to wear the Pictish brooches. We find them in graves' heavy silver pins, but with Pictish designs. Why? Was it to appropriate the power? To say, I have conquered this magic, so now I wear it? Or was it a form of protection? If I wear their symbols, maybe their ghosts will think I am one of them and leave me alone. It's like wearing a cross when you aren't a Christian, just in case. The Vikings were pragmatic. If the local magic works, use it. If the local gods are angry, appease them. So they wore the penannular brooches. They used the Pictish combs. And they probably learned a few words of the strange, wissing language to keep the bad luck away. Let's slow down the pace again. Feel the rhythm of the waves. Wash in, wash out. The longship is pulled up on the beach for the winter. The sails are folded. The men are inside the hull. The fear is still there, but it has become a story told by the fire. Tell us about the blue men, a child asks. The blue men, the old warrior says, his eyes flickering with the dance of the flames. They are the color of the storm. They can breathe water. They can turn into seals. Can you imagine that? It's like something out of a dream, right? Did you fight them, grandfather? The curious child asks, eyes wide with wonder. I survived them, he corrects, a knowing smile creeping onto his face. You do not fight the sea. You survive it. And that's such an important distinction. The Vikings didn't see the Picts and the northern tribes as enemies to be defeated. No, they viewed them more like a powerful force of nature, something you have to endure, like a relentless winter or a thick fog that rolls in unexpectedly. You don't declare war on the winter, you learn to live with it. You don't conquer the fog, you wait patiently for it to lift and reveal the world again. The real terror for the Vikings wasn't death itself, they were warriors, after all, ready to face their fate. What truly haunted them was the fear of losing their identity. Picture this, standing before these ancient, mystical cultures, the Vikings felt their own loudness and brightness fading away. It's like being a kid in a grand library, making too much noise, while the stern librarians of history watch with disapproval. Can you feel that tension? As time marched on, the Picts seemed to disappear from history. But it wasn't a dramatic genocide. It was more like a slow blending. They became the Scots, the Norse Gaels. The bloodlines merged, and with that, the fear faded into folklore. Those standing stones that once held so much meaning, they became just old stones to the farmers plowing their fields, losing their stories in the process. But let's rewind a bit. For a few hundred years, right around the twilight of the first millennium, there was a genuine, trembling fear in the hearts of the conquerors. A fear of the painted skin, the silent arrow, and especially the woman who sang to the storm. Can you imagine that? It's not just about battles and bloodshed. It's about the fear of the unknown, the mysterious, and the powerful forces that these cultures represented. Now, as we draw closer to the end of our journey, the fire is nearly out. Just a few sparks are drifting up the chimney, joining the stars in the cold night sky. The longship, once a symbol of adventure and conquest, is drifting into the fog, slowly disappearing from view. The shout of the Viking has faded, just like the whistle of the Pict. All that remains is the wind, the sound of the sea, and the deep, restful silence of history. We've wandered through these icy fears tonight, haven't we? We've stood in the bogs, watching the mists roll in, feeling the cold iron of the past, and the soft moss beneath our feet. It's time to leave the warriors to their rest. They've fought enough. They feared enough. And you, my friend, you've listened enough. It's time to let go of the stories, to let go of the names and dates that can weigh us down. Let go of the fear, because the world is safe now. The night is yours to embrace. Sleep is waiting for you, just like a calm sea waiting for a boat to come ashore. If you're still here, drifting on the edge of dreams with me, thank you for walking this path together. If you enjoyed this quiet journey into the dark, I'd love for you to subscribe. It really helps the channel and allows me to share even more stories with you. Drop a good night in the comments if you made it this far, or share what you dreamt of. Good night, sleep well, and may your dreams be free of the blue men and the silent arrows. Hey guys, tonight, we drift softly into the lantern-lit chaos of Edo's night markets. We are going back to a time before electric lights stole the stars from the sky, back when the night was truly dark, and the only islands of safety were the warm, glowing stalls of street vendors. Like and subscribe if you enjoy these long walks into the past. And, as always, please comment down below where you are listening from and what time it is there. I love reading about the quiet moments you steal for yourself in the middle of the night or the early morning. Settle in now, Close your eyes. Imagine the air is cooling around you. The smells of charred soy sauce, frying tempura, and vinegared rice are filling the air, drifting like ghosts from iron griddles. The wooden wheels of 1,000 carts are trundling over the earth, and the city of Edo is waking up for its second life. Let the worries of your day fade away as the steam rises. Our journey begins not with a taste, but with the darkness itself. In the Edo period, specifically during the 18th and early 19th centuries, the night was a different creature than what we know today. When the sun dipped below the silhouette of Mount Fuji to the west, the city did not burst into neon. It settled into a heavy, velvety blackness. There were no street lamps, only the moon and the stars, and the occasional flicker of a fire watchman's lantern patrolling the wooden maze of the city. But if you looked towards the bridges, specifically the Great Bridge at Ryogoku, or the approaches to the shrines, or the fire breaks near the pleasure quarters, you would see a galaxy of small, trembling lights. These were the paper lanterns of the yatai, the mobile food stalls. The yatai was the heartbeat of Edo's nightlife. These were not permanent structures. They were marvels of carpentry and balance, built to be carried on a yoke across a man's shoulders or pushed on large, wooden wheels that creaked rhythmically against the packed dirt streets. Each stall was a self-contained world, a roof of timber or thatch to keep off the rain, a small counter of polished wood worn smooth by 10,000 elbows, and a curtain, the Norren fluttering gently in the evening breeze. The Norren was important. It offered a veil of privacy. You see, in this strict feudal society, eating while standing up, right there in the street, was considered somewhat vulgar. It was bad manners, but the hunger of the night does not care for manners. So, a samurai, drifting away from his duties, might duck his head under the navy blue cloth of a stall, hiding his face in the steam, becoming just another shadow with an appetite. Let us walk up to the first stall we see. The lantern hanging from the eave paints the ground in warm amber light. The call of the vendor is low and rhythmic, a song he has sung every night for 20 years. He is selling something that defines the very soul of Edo, nigiri sushi. Now, the sushi we see here is not the delicate, bite-sized pieces you might find in a modern restaurant. This is Edo-mei sushi in front of Edo, meaning the fish was caught right here in the bay. And it is huge. Each piece is the size of a tennis ball, a fistful of rice. It was a meal in itself, meant for laborers, palanquin bearers, and merchants in a hurry. You can smell it before you see it. The scent is sharp and appetizing. It is the smell of a kosu, red vinegar made from sake leaves. This vinegar gave the rice a reddish-brown hue and a rich, savory depth that white vinegar simply cannot match. Watch the master's hands. They move in a blur, yet with a calm precision. He dips his hand into a wooden bucket of water mixed with vinegar the tezu. To keep the rice from sticking, he grabs a handful of warm rice. It is not cold. In the Edo period, the rice was served slightly warm, creating a beautiful contrast with the cool fish. He presses it firmly. There is no refrigeration here, no ice. To keep the fish safe and delicious, every piece has been treated, cured, or cooked. This is the art of preservation as much as flavor. He lays a slab of tuna on the rice. But this tuna, the maguro, has been marinated in soy sauce for hours, turning it a deep, glistening crimson. He calls it zouk. He presses the fish to the rice, molding it with 2 fingers, a technique that looks like he is folding a piece of silk. He brushes the top with a thick, sweet soy sauce reduction called nigiri. It glistens in the lantern light like dark lacquer. You stand there at the counter, the wood rough against your forearms. You pick up the giant piece of sushi with your fingers. Chopsticks are for the noodle shops. Here we use our hands. The texture is firm, the rice grains distinct. When you bite into it, the sour punch of the red vinegar meets the salty, umami-rich depth of the marinated tuna. Wasabi was not just for heat. It was believed to kill bacteria, a spicy shield against the dangers of raw food. You eat 2 of these massive rice balls, drink a cup of hot, cloudy green tea that the vendor pours from a giant iron kettle, and your hunger is gone. You wipe your hands on the curtain as you leave, a tradition that meant the dirtier the curtain, the better the sushi and the more popular the stall. As we drift away from the sushi cart, the sour tang of vinegar fades, replaced by something heavier, grazier, and deeply comforting. The sound changes, too. The silence of the sushi preparation is replaced by a hiss, a crackle, the sound of liquid meeting heat. We are approaching a tempura stall. In the early days of Edo, frying food in oil was dangerous. The wooden city was a tinderbox, and fire was the flower of Edo, a poetic name for a terrifying reality. Because of this, deep frying was often banned inside private homes. If you wanted the crisp, golden delight of tempura, you had to go to the streets, to the fire breaks, and the open plazas where the risk was managed. The tempura stall is hotter than the others. A charcoal brazier glows red hot beneath a deep iron pot filled with sesame oil. The oil is dark, fragrant, and nutty. It is not the neutral vegetable oil of today. Sesame oil was the scent of luxury for the commoner. The vendor stands behind a cloud of steam. He is skewering ingredients. This is another difference. Pseudo tempura was almost always served on skewers, so you could walk and eat without getting grease on your kimono. Look at the ingredients laid out on bamboo trays. There are prawns from Edo Bay, their shells glistening. There are slices of sweet potato, rings of lotus root, and distinct clumps of kakiaja, mix of small shellfish and vegetable scraps bound together by batter. The batter itself is cold, mixed just seconds ago. The vendor dips a skewer of whiting fish into the batter. It coats the fish lightly. Then he lowers it into the dark, bubbling oil. Listen to that sound. It is a violent sizzle that quickly settles into a steady, rhythmic bubbling. It is a sound that speaks of transformation. The batter puffs up, turning golden and craggy. The moisture inside the fish turns to steam, cooking it gently within its crunchy armor. The smell is intoxicating: toasted sesame, hot flour, the brine of the sea. People are gathered around this stall, their faces illuminated by the glow of the brazier. A group of carpenters, finished with their day's work, are laughing quietly, blowing on hot skewers of shrimp. A messenger, his sandals worn thin, stops for a quick stick of kakiage. The vendor lifts the skewer from the oil, letting the excess drip back into the pot. He does not offer a dipping sauce of broth and radish. No, this is street food. He dips the hot tempura directly into a pot of soy sauce and sweet sake, or perhaps just sprinkles it with coarse sea salt. He hands you a skewer of lotus root. It is incredibly hot. You have to blow on it, your breath mingling with the steam in the cool night air. The first bite is a revelation. The crunch is loud, echoing in your ears. The nuttiness of the sesame oil is profound, soaking into the batter. Inside, the lotus root is crisp and sweet. It is oily, yes, but in a way that feels necessary against the chill of the night. You stand there, chewing slowly, watching the sparks fly up from the charcoal, drifting like fireflies before vanishing into the dark. We move on. The night is deepening. The crowds are thinning in some places, but thickening in others. We are walking towards the sound of running water, perhaps near the banks of the Sumida River. Here, the air is damper, cooler, and cutting through the chill is a smell that is earthy, nutty, and unmistakably sweet. It is the scent of burning leaves and roasted sugar. We have found the Yoki IMO seller, the roasted sweet potato merchant. This is a humbler trade. Often, the vendor does not even have a stall. He might just have a large wooden cart, or even two large baskets balanced on a pole. But usually, for the night markets, it is a cart fitted with a special iron oven. The oven is drum-shaped, filled with smooth pebbles collected from the river beds. A fire burns beneath the pebbles, heating them until they radiate a gentle, consistent warmth. Buried within these hot stones are the sweet potatoes. The potato of choice in Edo was the Satsuma Imo. It arrived in Japan in the early 17th century and saved millions from famine. But here, on the streets of Edo, it is a treat, a cheap comfort. The vendor cries out his wares, a long, drawn-out yar dash ki I dash I dash mu o. A sound that stretches like taffy through the alleyways. It is a lonely sound, yet one that brings people running from their homes. Watch as he opens the iron door of his oven. A cloud of sweet steam billows out, smelling of caramelized sugar and earth. He uses long iron tongs to shift the pebbles aside. He pulls out a potato. Its skin is purple, almost black in spots, where the sugars have bubbled out and charred against the hot stones. He wraps it in a piece of old newspaper or a bamboo leaf. It is heavy in your hand, a dense warmth that radiates through your palms. You break it open. The flesh inside is vibrant yellow, steaming furiously. The texture is not dry. It is creamy, almost like a custard. In the Edo period, sugar was expensive, a luxury for the rich. For the common people, the Yoki Imo was the sweetest thing they would taste all week. It was nature's candy. You take a bite. It sticks to the roof of your mouth, sweet and cloying in the best possible way. It tastes of the earth, of the fire, of patience. This was the food of the women and children. But late at night, you would see burly laborers buying them, warming their hands on the hot skins before devouring them in 3 bites. The superstition said that eating a whole sweet potato ensured you wouldn't catch a cold. Whether it was true or not, the warmth spreading through your chest certainly makes you feel invincible against the night air. The path leads us away from the river now, turning into a narrower street. The shadows are longer here. The lanterns are fewer, but there is a light ahead, a small, stationary stall with a red lantern. And the smell. The smell is complex. It is savory, fishy, and incredibly potent. We are approaching an Odin store. Odin is a stew, but calling it a stew feels inadequate. It is a collection of ingredients simmering for hours, sometimes days, in a light soy-flavored dashi broth. In Edo, this was the ultimate slow food. The stall is quiet. The vendor is an older man, sitting on a small stool, watching the steam rise from his square copper pot. The pot is divided into compartments, each holding a different treasure. There are thick rounds of daikon radish, translucent and amber-colored from absorbing the broth. There are triangles of konnyaku, a firm, jelly-like cake made from yam, which has almost no flavor of its own, but drinks up the soup like a sponge. There are fish cakes, chikuwa, shaped like tubes. And there are boiled eggs, their whites turned a light brown. The magic of Odin is in the simmer. The broth is never boiled vigorously, just kept at a gentle tremble. This prevents the ingredients from breaking apart and allows the flavors to meld. The broth itself is made from kelp and dried bonito flakes, seasoned with soy sauce and a touch of mirin. It is the color of weak tea. You take a seat on the narrow wooden bench in front of the stall. The vendor acknowledges you with a nod. You point to what you want. He uses a long pair of chopsticks to fish out a piece of daikon. He places it in a shallow bowl, adding a splash of the hot broth. He puts a smudge of bright yellow karashi mustard on the side of the bowl. The daikon is the star of the winter night. When you cut into it with your chopsticks, it yields instantly. It is soft all the way through. You put a piece in your mouth. It dissolves. It is hot liquid held together by fiber. The flavor is mild, salty, and deeply savory. The mustard clears your sinuses, a sharp counterpoint to the mellow broth. Odin was the food of conversation, because it took time to eat, because the broth was hot and needed to be sipped. People lingered at these stalls. They talked about the kabuki actors, about the price of rice, about the scandals in the castle. The Odin cart was the confessional of the street. The steam hid your face, the broth warmed your belly, and the stranger next to you was just another soul seeking comfort in the dark. As we finished the broth, tilting the bowl to get the last drop, we hear a different sound. A bell. A small, high-pitched ringing. Cherin, cherin. It is coming from a vendor walking with a box on his back. He is selling amazake. Amazake is a traditional sweet drink made from fermented rice. It is low in alcohol, thick, and porridge-like. In the cold months, it was served piping hot with a grate of ginger on top. The vendor sets down his box. He has a small charcoal heater inside it to keep the pot warm. He ladles the white, lumpy liquid into a bamboo cup. This drink dates back centuries. It is rich in nutrients, so much so that it was often called drinkable for drip in modern times. But in Edo, it was simply vitality in a cup. It was sweet without added sugar, the natural enzymes breaking down the rice starches into glucose. You cradle the cup. It smells yeasty and sweet. The ginger hits your nose, spicy and sharp. You take a sip. It coats your throat. It is thick, warm, and incredibly soothing. The sweetness is gentle, not sharp like candy. It warms you from the inside out. In the deep winter, these vendors were lifesavers. People believed that drinking amazake would ward off the summer heat fatigue if drunk in summer, and the winter chill if drunk now. It was a drink for all seasons, but tonight, under the cold moon, it feels like a warm blanket. The night markets of Edo were not just about food, they were about the rhythm of the city. The vendors were the timekeepers. They knew the flow of the night better than anyone. They knew when the theaters let out, sending waves of hungry patrons into the streets. They knew when the bathhouses closed, releasing people scrubbed clean and ready for a snack. They knew when the pleasure quarters were busiest. As we walk, observe the ground beneath your feet. It is packed earth, perhaps dampened by a worker sprinkling water to keep the dust down. Observe the shadows of the passers-by. A merchant in a fine silk kimono, holding a paper umbrella. A group of young apprentices running an errand, laughing and sharing a bag of roasted chestnuts. A stray dog, hopeful and wagging its tail near a fish stall. There is a harmony here. No cars honking, no sirens wailing, just the murmur of voices, the clatter of wooden sandals get on the stones, and the endless hiss and bubble of cooking. It is a symphony of hunger and satisfaction playing out on a stage of wood and paper. We are drifting deeper into the night now. The moon is higher, casting silver light on the tiled roofs of the temples. The air is getting colder, making the steam from the stalls appear even thicker, like white pillars supporting the dark sky. We have tasted the sushi, the tempura, the sweet potato, the odin, and the amazake. But there is so much more to taste, so many more stories hidden in the steam. There are the noodle sellers, the yozaki soba, wandering the streets with their melodious whistles. There are the grilled eel stalls, the unogi, where the smoke is so thick and fragrant it was said to cost money just to smell it. There are the sellers of grilled squid, of sweet dumplings, of strange and forgotten delicacies that have vanished into history. We will visit them all. We will walk until the first grey light of dawn touches the eastern sky. But for now, let the taste of the sweet amazake linger on your tongue. Let the warmth of the roasted potato stay in your hands. The night is long, and our journey has only just begun. We are still walking. The night has grown deeper, wrapping around the city of Edo like a heavy silk quilt. The moon has climbed higher, turning the tiles of the rooftops into a sea of silver scales. Can you feel the change in the air? It is quieter now. The frenetic energy of the early evening has settled into a steady, rhythmic hum. We have left the riverbank and are wandering into the maze of backstreets, the narrow alleys known as roji. Here, the shadows are long and intimate, and the light from the stalls feels even warmer, even more inviting. Listen closely. Do you hear that sound? It is faint at first, drifting on the wind. A delicate, high-pitched chiming dot furin. It is the sound of wind bells. But these bells are not hanging from the eaves of a house. They are moving. They are attached to a mobile cart, swaying with every step of the vendor. This sound is the siren song of the night for anyone in Edo who is still awake. It signals the arrival of Yozaki soba night time buckwheat noodles. The soba cart is a beautiful thing to behold in the darkness. It is built of dark, polished wood, resembling a small, portable shrine. On the front, a lantern swings, painting the kanji for soba onto the cobblestones. The vendor stops at a corner setting the cart down with a heavy thud. He does not need to shout. The bells have done his work for him. Within moments, sliding doors open nearby, and sleepy faces peer out, drawn by the promise of warmth. Soba in the Edo period was more than just food. It was a ritual of the common people. The noodles were known as nihochi, meaning 2/8. These referred to the ratio of the flour, 2 parts wheat flour to bind the dough, and 8 parts buckwheat flour for flavor and texture. This mixture was crucial. Pure buckwheat is brittle and hard to form, but with that touch of wheat, it becomes elastic, smooth, and slurpable. Watch the master as he prepares a bowl. He lifts a lid on the cart to reveal a pot of boiling water. The steam rushes up, vanishing into the night sky. He takes a bundle of raw noodles, cut thin and precise, and drops them into the rolling boil. They dance in the water, turning from pale gray to a rich, earthy brown. But the secret is in the broth. In Edo, the broth was dark, salty, and intense. It was made from dacia stock of dried bonito and kelp mixed with a strong soy sauce base, called keshi. This keshi was often aged in large ceramic jars for weeks, allowing the sharp edge of the soy sauce to mellow into something round and savory. The vendor ladles this dark liquid into a ceramic bowl. It smells of the ocean and the earth. He drains the noodles and slides them into the broth. He hands you the bowl. It is hot against your palms. There are no fancy toppings here. Perhaps just some chopped green onions or a sprinkle of shichimi 7-flavored chili pepper to wake up the palate. You hold the bowl up to your face. The steam acts as a facial, opening your pores, relaxing your muscles. You take your chopsticks and lift the noodles. And here, we must talk about the sound. In the West, eating quietly is polite. In Edo, to eat sober without a sound was an insult to the chef. You must slurp. Zuru zuru. The slurp serves a purpose. It draws cool air into your mouth along with the hot noodles, preventing burns, and it aerates the broth, spreading the aroma of the buckwheat through your nasal passages. It is physics and gastronomy combined. The texture of the noodles is firm, with a slight bite what the Italians call al dente, but the Japanese call koshi. It tastes of grain and fields. It is simple, unpretentious, and deeply grounding. As you drink the last of the salty broth, you feel a heaviness settle in your stomach. A good heaviness that promises deep sleep. The vendor takes the empty bowl, washes it in a bucket of water, and packs up his cart. The bells chime again, fading into the distance, moving on to feed the next hungry ghost of the night. We turn a corner, and suddenly the air changes. The subtle, earthy smell of buckwheat is overpowered by something thick, sweet, and smoky. It is a scent that grabs you by the collar. Smoke is billowing from a narrow shopfront that opens directly onto the street. The sign above says UNAGI.eel. Eel was the power food of Edo. In the humid, stifling heat of the Japanese summer, people believed that eating eel gave them stamina. But in the cool of the night market, it is a luxury, a treat for the senses. The preparation of eel in Edo was a matter of regional pride. In the West, in Osaka, they grilled the eel directly. But here, in the East, the eel was steamed first, then grilled. This made the meat incredibly soft, almost melting, stripping away excess fat and leaving only pure flavor. Step closer to the grill. The heat is intense. The charcoal used here is binchoten, a high-grade oak charcoal that burns white-hot without smoke or odor. This is important because you want to taste the fish and the sauce, not the fuel. The master stands there, fanning the coals with a paper fanachiwa. His rhythm is hypnotic. Flap, flap, pause. Flap, flap, pause. He is controlling the temperature with the wind of his own hand. The eels are skewered on bamboo sticks. They have been filleted down the back a samurai tradition, it is said, to avoid cutting the belly, which resembled ritual suicide. They are pale after steaming, but now begins the transformation. The master dips the entire skewer into a deep pot of sauce, the tari. This sauce is the soul of the shop. It is made of soy sauce, mirin, sugar, and sake. But it is not just mixed today. It is a master sauce, replenished daily but never emptied. The sauce in that pot might contain traces of sauce from 50, maybe 100 years ago. It has absorbed the oils and juices of thousands of grilled eels, gaining a depth of flavor that cannot be replicated by any recipe. He lays the dipped eel back on the grill dot sizzle. The sugars in the sauce caramelize instantly. The smell explodes into the street sweet, charred, savory. He flips them, dips them again, grills them again. The eel turns a deep, glossy mahogany color. You order a skewer, or perhaps a bowl of rice topped with the eel unadon. This dish, putting the eel on rice, was actually invented during the Edo period by a theater patron who wanted to keep his food warm. The vendor hands it to you in a lacquer box or a bowl. The rice beneath is soaked with the sauce that has dripped off the fish. The first bite is textureless in the best way. The eel dissolves on your tongue. The bones are gone, or so soft you don't notice them. The flavor is a balance of the sweet sauce and the rich, fatty fish. It is heavy, decadent food. It coats your mouth. It feels like you are eating energy itself. There is a sprinkling of Sancho pepper on top of green, citrusy spice that numbs the tongue slightly, cutting through the richness. Eating unogi at a night market feels illicit, like you are indulging in something too good for a Tuesday night. You watch the smoke curl up into the rafters of the store, washing the master's face illuminated by the orange glow of the coals. It is a scene that has been painted in woodblock prints 1,000 times, and here you are, living inside the art, leaving the heavy richness of the eel behind. We seek something lighter, something that speaks of the spiritual side of Edo. We walk towards the edge of a shrine complex. The torii gates are painted vermilion, looking black in the moonlight. Here, nestled near the entrance, is a small stall selling inari sushi. This is sushi, but not like the fish we ate earlier. This is named after Inari, the deity of rice, agriculture, and foxes. Legend said that the fox messengers of the god loved fried tofu. So, people made pouches of fried tofu, stuffed them with sushi rice, and offered them to the shrines. And, naturally, they started eating them too. The Inari stall is simple. No fire, no smoke, just large wooden trays stacked with golden brown pillows. The vendor is an old woman with hands wrinkled like parchment. She is packing the rice into the tofu skins with gentle, rhythmic motions. The tofu skin, aburage, has been boiled in a broth of dashi, sugar, and soy sauce until it is saturated with liquid. It is sweet and juicy. The rice inside is mixed with sesame seeds, or perhaps bits of lotus root for crunch, or sometimes just pure vinegared rice. You buy to pieces. They are cheap, the food of the commoner, often called a snack for the pocket. You hold one. It is cool to the touch, damp and slightly sticky. You take a bite. The sensation is a burst of liquid. The sweet, soy-infused broth rushes out of the tofu's skin, mixing with the sour acidity of the rice. It is a perfect contrast, sweet and sour, soft and grainy. It is comfort food in its purest form. It reminds the people of Edo of home, of their grandmothers, of the festivals of their childhood. It is quiet food. It doesn't crunch or slurp. You eat it standing in the shadow of the shrine gate, watching the few worshippers clap their hands and bow in the dim light. The silence here is profound, broken only by the rustle of the trees and the distant murmur of the main street. The inarizushi feels like a blessing, a small, golden prayer you can eat. We need something to drink to wash down the sweetness of the tofu. We walk a little further, past a cellar of crickets in bamboo cages singing insects were popular pets in Edo, to a stall with a large red umbrella. Underneath sits a large ceramic jar filled with a golden liquid. This is hiyashiem, a ginger drink. While amazake was for warmth, hiyashiem was for refreshment. It is made from malt syrup dissolved in hot water, infused with the juice of squeezed ginger, and then cooled. In the days before refrigeration, cold meant cool water drawn from a deep well or chilled in a flowing stream. The vendor ladles the amber liquid into a glass was rare and exotic, often imported or made by specialized craftsmen in Edo, adding to the allure of the drink. The glass is thick, bubbling with imperfections that catch the lantern light. You take a sip. It is sweet, the malt syrup tasting like liquid caramel. But then the ginger kicks in, a sharp, spicy burn that travels down your throat. It is revitalizing. It wakes you up just enough to keep walking, but not enough to break the trance of the night. The ginger lingers on your palate, a clean, spicy memory. As we continue, the character of the market changes again. We are entering an area known for entertainment, perhaps near a theater district. The crowd is denser here. We see samurai in their hakama, merchants, geisha walking in tall wooden clogs, their faces painted white as the moon. And here, we find the kushiyaki stalls, the grilled skewers. This is not just chicken. In the Edo period, people ate a variety of game birds and vegetables grilled on sticks. We see sparrow, quail, and duck. The smell is gamey and wild. The sparrows are grilled whole, bones and all, crunching loudly when eaten. But let's look at the vegetable skewers. Thick slices of shiitake mushrooms, scored with a knife to absorb the sauce. Green peppers, ginkgo nuts, glowing like emeralds on the stick. The ginkgo nuts are a special treat. They have a chewy, resinous texture and a slightly bitter flavor that pairs perfectly with sake. Speaking of sake, this is where the tachonomi stands are. Tachonomi means standing drink. These are the ancestors of the modern standing bar. They are simple counters, often just a plank of wood onto barrels. Behind the counter, large cedar casks of sake are stacked. The sake is served in wooden square boxes called mosu, or ceramic cups. You stop for a moment. You are not looking to get drunk, just to taste the rice wine of the region. The sake is likely karakuchi dry. It is served at room temperature or slightly warmed. You pay a few copper coins, moan, and the vendor pours. The liquid is clear, viscous. You take a sip. It tastes of melon, of rice, of fermentation. It warms your chest instantly. Around you, the conversation is flowing. A group of laborers are complaining about their foreman. A poet is reciting a haiku about the moon to anyone who will listen. The autumn moon, pines cast shadows on the mats. You listen to the cadence of the old Ada dialect, the berry rough speech of the locals. It is a musical language, full of clipped syllables and emphatic endings. From the savory, we must turn to the sweet again. For the night in Edo is a balance of salt and sugar. We wander towards a stall that is steaming gently, smelling of rice flour and mugwort. It is a dango stall. Dango are dumplings made from rice flour, rolled into balls and skewered on bamboo sticks. Usually, there are 3 or 4 to a stick. In the spring, they are pink, white, and green for the cherry blossoms. But tonight, at the night market, we are looking for mitarashi dango. These dumplings are white, grilled over charcoal until they are slightly scorched. The grill marks are black and crispy, providing a crucial texture contrast to the soft, chewy interior. The vendor dips the whole skewer into a thick, glass-like sauce. This glaze is made from soy sauce, sugar, and starch. It is sweet and salty, a flavor profile that defines Japanese confectionery. You buy a stick. The sauce is sticky, threatening to drip onto your clothes. You have to be careful. You bite into the first dumpling. It is warm and incredibly soft. It has a texture the Japanese call moki chewy, elastic, satisfying. The burnt soy sauce gives it a bitter edge that cuts the sugar. It pulls at your teeth slightly. There is something childishly delightful about eating food off a stick. It makes you feel unburdened. You stand by the stall, licking the sweet sauce from your lips, watching the vendor grill the next batch. He moves with an economy of motion, flipping, dipping, serving. It is a dance he has performed 1,000 times. Deep in the night, when even the fishmongers have gone to sleep, and only the true night owls remain, we find the stalls selling the strange and the forgotten. We find a stall selling dojone bloach hot pot. Loaches are small, eel-like fish found in the muddy rivers and rice paddies. They were the poor man's eel. They are small, slippery, and full of energy. The stall is humble, perhaps just a few low tables set directly on the dirt. A flat iron pan sits over a charcoal brazier on the table. The loaches are cooked whole. They are simmered in a sweet soy broth with piles of shaved burdock root gobo. The burdock adds an earthy, woody flavor that masks any muddiness from the fish. Finally, an egg is beaten and poured over the boiling mixture, sealing everything in a fluffy yellow blanket. The dish is bubbling furiously when it is placed before you. Yanagawa-nabe, they call it. You scoop a spoonful of the egg, burdock, and fish. It is intensely hot. The loach is soft, the bones negligible. The burdock provides a pleasant crunch. It is a rustic, hearty dish, full of iron and protein. It is the food of the river people, the boatmen and the diggers. It tastes of the soil of Edo itself. As we finish the hot pot, the wind picks up slightly, rustling the paper of the lanterns. The flames flicker, making the shadows dance wild jigs on the walls. The night is old now. The constellations have shifted overhead. The crowds have thinned to a trickle. The loud laughter has died down, replaced by hushed whispers and the scuff of sandals. But our appetite is an endless traveler. There are still streets we haven't walked, flavors we haven't explored. We haven't tasted the crisp skin of the taiyaki, sea bream cakes. Though they are a later invention, their ancestors' simple grilled cakes were here. We haven't visited the stalls selling dried squid, chewed slowly like jerky to pass the time. We haven't seen the tea stalls where travelers rest their weary legs and swap stories of the road. The city of Edo breathes around us. It is a living organism, and these stalls are the cells that keep it alive. Every skewer, every bowl, every cup is a connection between people, a moment of shared humanity in the vast, dark night. The steam rises, joining the clouds. The smells linger in the fabric of your clothes. We will find a place to rest for a moment, perhaps on a bench near the bridge, watching the black water of the river flow towards the sea. We will wait for the next wave of hunger, for the next discovery, because in Edo, the night is never truly over until the sun commands it. We are resting for a moment on the edge of the Nihon Boshi Bridge. The wood beneath us is cool and damp. Below, the dark water of the river laps quietly against the wooden pilings, a gentle, rhythmic slapping sound that measures out the passing of the night. Look up. The moon has started its descent, hanging low and heavy like a ripe peach in the western sky. The stars are brilliant pinpricks of ice. From this vantage point, we can see the veins of the city glowing. The main thoroughfares are ribbons of amber light, stretching away into the darkness. But we are not staying here on the bridge. We are descending back into the labyrinth, towards the sound of a different kind of bustle. We are heading towards the Yoshiwara, the pleasure quarters. The markets near the Yoshiwara are awake when the rest of the city sleeps. This is a world turned upside down, where night is day. The entrance is marked by the Omugaman, the Great Gate, and beyond it lies a city within a city. But we are staying just outside the gates, in the spillover streets, where the food stalls cater to the revelers, the musicians, and the hopefuls. Here, the smells are richer, more perfume mixed with smoke. We approach a stall that is brightly lit, surrounded by people dressed in finery that looks a little disheveled by the late hour. The vendor is selling tamagoyaki rolled omelette. Now, an egg seems like a simple thing. But in Edo, eggs were considered a potent food, a source of vitality, and the tamagoyaki of the night market is a masterpiece of technique. The pan is rectangular, made of copper, and seasoned until it is black. The vendor pours a thin layer of egg mixture into the pan. It sizzles instantly. The mixture is seasoned with dashi, sugar, and soy sauce, always that holy trinity of Edo flavor. Watch him. With a flick of his chopsticks, he rolls the thin sheet of cooked egg to one side. He oils the empty space. He pours another layer. He lifts the first roll so the raw egg flows underneath. He rolls it again, layer upon layer. He builds a golden log. It is architecture with protein. When he is finished, he turns the log out onto a bamboo mat and shapes it while it is still hot. He slices it into thick, yellow blocks. Steam rises from the cut surface, smelling sweet and custardy. He serves it on a skewer. You take a bite. It is nothing like a Western omelette. It is dense, juicy, and sweet. It has the texture of a firm cake. The dashy broth trapped between the layers bursts in your mouth. It is warm and comforting, a taste of luxury that costs only a few copper coins. It was said that a good wife in Edo was judged by her tamago-yaki, but the masters of the street stalls were the true artists, feeding the men who were far from their wives. Moving away from the omelette store, we find ourselves near a vendor who is working with something white and sticky. He is pounding it with a wooden mallet in a mortar. Thwack, thwack. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic sound. He is making mochi, but this is not just any mochi. This is abikawa mochi. The freshly pounded rice cake is pulled from the mortar it stretches like molten glass and torn into bite-sized pieces. The vendor drops them into a bowl of water to keep them from sticking. Then he fishes them out and tosses them into a tray filled with Kinaka roasted soybean flour mixed with sugar. The pale white mochi is coated in the golden powder. It looks like a nugget of velvet. He serves it on a small plate. You pick it up with a bamboo toothpick. The powder falls like snow. The taste is dry at first. The nutty, toasted flavor of the soybean flour coating your tongue. Then you bite into the mochi. It is soft, incredibly elastic, and mild. It is a textural journey. The dry powder mixes with the moisture of the rice cake to create a sweet paste in your mouth. This was a popular snack for travelers on the Tokaido Road. But here in the city, it is a sweet ending to a savory night. It is simple, unadorned, and ancient. As we walk deeper into the shadows, we come across a stall that looks different. It has no fire, no steam. It is a cold stall. The vendor has a large wooden tub filled with ice that was cut from frozen lakes in winter and stored in underground caverns called himuro, ice chambers. This was an incredible luxury in summer, but even on cooler nights, it was a marvel. He is selling tokaroten. Tokaroten are noodles, but not made of grain. They are made of tengusa, a type of seaweed. The seaweed is boiled down until it turns into a jelly, then pressed through a wooden device called a tensuki that shreds the block of jelly into clear, rectangular noodles. The vendor pushes the jelly through the grate. Schlock. The noodles fall into a bowl of cold water. They are transparent, shimmering like glass. He drains them and pours a sauce over them. In Edo, the sauce was vinegar and soy sauce, with a dab of mustard. In the Kansai region to the west, they used brown sugar syrup, but Edoites liked their tang. He hands you the bowl. It is beautiful to look at, like eating rain. The texture is brittle. The noodles snap when you bite them. They have the faint scent of the ocean, but mostly taste of the vinegar dressing. It is a palate cleanser. It washes away the grease of the tempura and the sweetness of the mochi. It wakes up your mouth with its cold, sharp acidity. It feels medicinal, clean, and pure. We wander further. The path is leading us towards a row of red lanterns that seem to float in the darkness. We hear laughter loud and boisterous. We are near a gambling den, illegal but tolerated in the shadows. And where there are gamblers, there is tekamaki. Legend says this sushi roll was invented in the gambling dens, the tekaba. The gamblers didn't want to stop playing to eat. They needed food they could hold in one hand while throwing dice with the other. Food that wouldn't get sticky rice on their cards. So, the sushi chefs wrapped the rice and tuna in nori, seaweed, keeping the sticky parts inside. The stall here specializes in these rolls. The nori is toasted over a charcoal brazier until it is crisp and green-black. The sound of the crisp seaweed snapping is part of the experience. The chef spreads the vinegared rice thin, places a strip of red tuna in the center, and adds a smear of wasabi. He rolls it tight using a bamboo mat. He cuts it into 6 pieces. The cross-section looks like a flour-black rim, white rice, red center. You pop one into your mouth. The contrast is delightful. The crisp, dry seaweed shatters, then mixes with the soft rice and the cool fish. The wasabi hits your nose, a sudden rush of heat that fades quickly. It is efficient eating. It is fast food in the truest sense, born of necessity and vice, yet perfected into elegance. Walking away from the gamblers, the streets become quieter again. We find ourselves in a residential district, where the walls are made of blackened wood and the streets are narrow. Here, we smell something comforting, something that smells like a grandmother's kitchen. We find a Nemono stall simmered things. This vendor has a large pot with a heavy wooden lid. He lifts it, and a cloud of steam reveals a treasure trove of vegetables. There are chunks of pumpkin, kabaka, simmered until they are falling apart. There are sotoimo, taro roots, slippery and soft. There are dried shiitake mushrooms, rehydrated and plump with broth. And there are pieces of dried herring or octopus for flavor. This is the taste of Ofukuro no Oji, mother's flavor. It is sweet and salty, seasoned with soy sauce, sugar, and sake. The vegetables are cut into irregular shapes, ranjiri, to provide more surface area for the flavor to penetrate. You buy a small bowl of simmered pumpkin. The skin is dark green, the flesh bright orange. It is hot. You blow on it. It is sweet, almost like a dessert, but with a savory undertone from the dashi. It melts on your tongue. It is food that hugs you from the inside. In a city of transients, of people who had left their rural homes to work in the capital, this taste was a link to the past, a reminder of the soil they came from. The night is turning towards morning. We can feel it in the air. A slight breeze has picked up, rustling the leaves of the willow trees. The darkness is losing its absolute hold. It is turning a deep, charcoal gray. And in this pre-dawn hour, we find the stalls that cater to the early risers, the fishermen heading to the market, the tofu sellers starting their rounds. We find a stall selling chazuk. This is the ultimate comfort food, often eaten at the end of a meal or after a night of drinking. It is rice with green tea poured over it. The vendor has a large wooden tub of cooked rice. He scoops a bowlful. He sprinkles it with savory toppings, perhaps some flaked grilled salmon, or some sukadoni, small fish, or seaweed simmered in soy sauce, or just some pickled plums, yumboshi. Then he pours hot, green tea over the whole thing. The tea is not the high-grade ceremonial matcha. It is bancha, roasted coarse tea, nutty and brown. The liquid swirls around the white rice. You mix it with your chopsticks. The water turns cloudy. You lift the bowl to your lips and shovel the mixture in. It is hot, soupy, and salty. The tea softens the rice. The pickles provide a sharp, sour crunch. It is incredibly hydrating. It settles the stomach, right? Just the thought of it makes you feel all warm and cozy inside. It's simple, humble, and absolutely perfect. That first sip is like a gentle hug for your insides. It washes away the excesses of the night, like a soothing balm, and gets your body ready for whatever the day has in store. Nearby, there's another vendor dishing out shijimi jiro clam soup. Oh man, this stuff is special. Shijimi are these tiny freshwater clams, even smaller than your fingernail, and they're believed to be fantastic for your liver. Seriously, they're like a hangover cure in a bowl. The soup itself is this cloudy miso wonder, brimming with hundreds of those tiny shells. You can hear it, to the distinct sound of eating it. Click, clack. That's the shells tapping against the ceramic bowl. A little symphony of breakfast. You start with the broth, and wow, it's rich with the flavor of the shellfish, briny and deep. Like the ocean itself, the miso, it's dark and red, aka miso, strong and fermented, giving it that punch that wakes you right up. Then comes the fun part, using your chopsticks to fish out those tiny pieces of meat from the shells. It's not just eating, it's a whole experience. You've got to be patient and focused, and honestly, it feels a bit meditative. You zero in on those little clams, and for a moment, you forget about the bustling city around you. It's just you and your bowl of soup. A moment of calm in the chaos. As we finish our soup, the sky is lightening up. The indigo is fading to a soft pale blue in the east, and it's beautiful. The first crows start calling, their harsh calls echoing over the rooftops, almost like they're waking the city up. The lanterns from the stalls are looking a bit dim against the brightening light, and you can see the vendors beginning to pack up their goods, wrapping up another night of hard work. We catch a glimpse of a sushi seller washing his wooden board, water splashing onto the stones like little bursts of life. Then there's the tempura seller, carefully filtering his oil, saving it for the next night's hustle. And over there, the sober seller is hitching himself to his cart, the wind bells chiming softly, almost like they're saying goodbye to the night as he prepares for the long walk home. The night market is dissolving, like a dream fading upon waking. It leaves behind only the smells and the memories, the rich tapestry of flavors and experiences we've gathered. The wooden shutters of the shops slide open with a familiar sound, gara gara gara. It's like the city of the day is waking up, ready to embrace a new dawn. But us? We're creatures of the night. We've walked those lantern-lit paths, tasted the history of Edo, and filled our bellies with rice, fish, soy, and sugar. There's this lovely heaviness in our stomachs, a contentment that feels like a warm blanket wrapping around us. We take a slow stroll towards the riverbank one last time. The water is grey now, reflecting the morning sky, and it's peaceful. A boatman is poling a skiff down the river, his silhouette dark against the mist, like a scene from a painting. The world is quiet, caught in that magical moment between the moon and the sun. We've wandered these lantern paths tonight, from the bustling bridge to the serene shrine, from the savory smoke of eel to the sweet comfort of potato. We've been like ghosts in a city that no longer exists, yet it feels so real that we can almost taste it. I really hope you found a little place of rest in this journey with me. I hope the sounds of frying oil and the vendor-esque calls have lulled you into a peaceful state. The night may be over for Edo, but for you, sleep is just waiting to embrace you. If you enjoyed this little adventure, I'd love for you to subscribe and drop a comment. Which stall would you have visited first? Can you smell the charcoal and the rain? Close your eyes now. Let the image of those fading lanterns be the last thing you see. Let the sound of the wind bells follow you into your dreams. Good night, my friend.